Welcome back. In this task, we will see how Shiny creates the layout for the UI for our web apps. Why do we need to know that? We need to know that so that we can place a drop-down box here. This is the app that we created at the end of the second guided project. And this is where we want to get to. We want to add this drop-down box here. Now let's go back to the app that we created in the second guided project. The question is, how do we get the space? We need to borrow the space from this title. Remember, we did not in any way specify how to lay out the title in the map. Let's look at the code that we created in the second guided project. So here is the UI. We have this fluid page function with three arguments: the theme, the title panel, and leaflet output. The theme really styled our app. The title panel placed a title in our app, and then the leaflet output placed a map. Let's go back to the app. So it appears that Shiny put the title on one row and the map in another row. It gave them their own individual spaces. Now, to understand how to put a drop-down here, we need to understand how the space was created and allotted to the title. So let's look at this slide to understand slightly better. I have reproduced an image of the app in this slide. It's as if Shiny created two rows in the app. In the top row, it put the title, and there's this red border to mark the top row. And in the bottom row, it put the map, and the border is green. Let me get rid of the map. And this is how it laid it out. A thin top row and a fat bottom row. That's what it appears, and indeed, that's what Shiny did, even without us telling it. Let's tell it explicitly to put them in separate rows and see what we get. So we'll go to RStudio Cloud. Now, I'll make several modifications here, and I'll give you the code for this, the final code, in the task after the next task. There's quite a few changes, and I'll walk you through the changes step by step. So to add a row to the UI, we use the fluid row function. So let me do that. I'll add two rows here. Fluid row. And I'll add one more row. And I'll place the title panel in the first fluid row. And I'll place the leaflet output in the second fluid row. And now let's run it to see what we get. I'll run external, it's selected. And we get the same app by explicitly putting in the fluid rows. So let's stop this. Let's stop this. Now the question is, how do we borrow space? Can we split a row? Can we split this fluid row? Notice it's called fluid row and it adjusts the height. That's how it gives a thin row to title panel and a fat row to leaflet output. So let's see how we can split the row, and I'll use this slide to explain that. Shiny allows us to split a row in 12 columns. So here is how we can split. So we have this top row split in 12 and the bottom row split in 12. Let's say we'll assign 10 columns to the title and 2 columns to the drop-down. And we'll assign all the 12 columns to the map. So let's see how we'll assign columns. We'll go back to the code. The way we assign columns is by using a column function. So here in fluid row, we'll do column and press enter, and then we'll say 10 here, press enter, and then we'll just put it here. So we're saying in the first fluid row, assign 10 columns to the title panel. What about the other 2 columns? We'll take a look at them shortly. So let's save this file and we'll run the app. And notice we got the same app. The title wasn't impacted because it didn't need all the 12 columns. Now let's try and use the other 2 columns. And I'll just put some dummy data there. And I'll say column 2. And I'll say title panel. And I'll just put city over there. That's all. And that makes up the 12 columns in the row. We don't touch the next row. It's just all the columns for the leaflet output. So let's save this. And now let's run it. And as you can see, we got the text city in the 2 columns that we reserved for the drop-down. Of course, we don't need the city here. We need a drop-down. And in the next task, we will see how to do that. This code may actually look very confusing, but all we have done is we followed the documentation, just like we followed the documentation when we use the add markers function. What we have here is the fluid page function, in which we have 3 arguments: the shiny theme function call, the fluid row function call, and the fluid row function call. And in the first fluid row function call, we pass an argument column, which is a function, and to that function column we give 2 arguments, the number of columns we want and the title panel, which is again a function. So this is nested functions. However, the complexity that we see is really handled by the author of the Shiny package. All we are doing it is using the functions as specified in the documentation. And it takes a little while to get used to it, but all we are doing it is following documentation. And let me show you documentation, some documentation for this. Here is the application layout guide for Shiny, and there's several examples here of laying out the UI. And you can take a look at it, and it shows how to create columns and rows. So in this task, we understood how Shiny creates a layout, and we created space for our drop-down. In the next task, we will add the drop-down. So I will see you in a short while.